Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to actually exclude all of these small cells. So we've shown how we can make them a uniform size, say below $10,000, but let's actually hide them now if they're below $10,000. Well, we could go to sales and put a filter on. Now, because this is a measure, we don't get the same dialog box as we did for dimensions. We then asked, how do we want to filter on sales? Do we want to use the sum, the average, the median, the count? Count distinct, in other words, suppose you have a column with apple, table, apple, chair. Well, the count of that would be 4, but the count distinct would be 3 because one of them is repeated. So if we go to sum and click next, so I want the sum. We've got several options now. Now it's a bit of a fairly complicated dialog box, but actually there's not that many options. You can either have from and to, you could just have from, you could just have to. So in reality these three are all one and the same. You could have had from minus 2 billion to whatever value you wanted, and that would have been the same as at most. So choose whichever one you want to work with. I want to work with at least $10,000. Now notice that I can include null values if I wanted to. There's also a special dialog box which says I just want null values or non-null values. So let's not include null values, and let's say at least 10,000 up to whatever the maximum is. So have a look at these small little dots. So they all disappear, allowing me to concentrate on the bigger ones. But suppose I didn't want to do it that way. Another way of doing it is to make a calculated field. So one that will say yes, for example, if sales is above 10,000. So let's drag this filter out and we'll make a calculated field. We'll make a new measure, right and click down here, create calculated field. Now a new dialog box comes up. Now you may not get this second half. It is hidden away like that by default. So if you find you haven't got this, click on this button, and this is very useful because this actually tells you all of the functions that you can use, and it's very Excel based. I mean, it includes find, for instance, it includes if, but there are some features of other languages like if, which again are very useful. So if we just concentrate on what we're doing, so is or are sales more than 10,000? So we'll use the if if command. So you can see you've just double clicked on if. We have the calculation contains errors. So it says this is what I'm expecting: a boolean, a float, and a float. Float in this particular context is a bit of a weird thing, because float to me says number, whereas you can see in the example on the right hand side that float could actually be a string. Anyway, if sales, and you notice we have this autocomplete, if sales is greater than 10,000, comma, single quotation mark y, or single quotation mark n. And you can see the calculation is valid. So if I click OK, we have, well, even though I said I wanted it in measures, it's not actually a measure, is it? Because it's not something you can calculate on. It's actually a dimension, and the computer's accurately put it in dimensions. So we'll move that across to the filters, and we get our older dialog box because we're doing this on a measure, and I just want y's, and click OK. And instantly you can see it hasn't worked. So why hasn't it worked? Well, let's go back into this, and what it's doing is it's looking at each individual row and saying, is the row for that individual line more than 10,000? And in this case, it's not. So what we need to put it around is a sum. So let's just start again. If sum of sales, notice how helpful it's being, is greater than 10,000, then yes or no. Calculation is valid. So the earlier calculation was also valid, it was just wrong. So don't rely on the fact that the calculation is valid as meaning that it will give you the answer that you want. This only means that it is logically correct. So let's click OK. Ooh, we can see there's a problem. It's in red. So let's move it out. And where's it gone? It's back into the measures. So let's move that into the filters, and we find we can't. So it is a measure now. So the only thing we can put to measures are in pages. So there we can see the answer. So let's have a look as to why this is not possible. So looking at the Tableau knowledge base, using filters is one way of refining the data in your view. However, in some cases, Tableau might not let you allow to use a calculated field as a filter. For example, when the calculated field is a discrete aggregated field, aggregation, sum, average, count. Tableau does not support placing on the filter shelf a calculated field that contains an aggregation that results in discrete values, such as, and this is very similar to the example that I just used. So there's the URL if you want to read more, because it does go on and on and on about possible ways of doing this. So how to get around this? So first of all, let's get this away. There we go. So how to get around this? Well, there are 3 ways mentioned in that article. I'll show you one of the perhaps easiest one. We create a new calculated field. So I'm going to call this filter our sales above 10,000. And we go to the lookup function and we type in our original calculated field and we put comma 0. And that's it. Bizarre that you have to go through this, but so now we have this filter, our sales above 10,000. So we can't drag in our sales more than 10,000, but with this lookup table, because we've put a function around this sum, I can drag this into the filters. So finally I can filter on yes, sales are above 10,000, and that hides everything which has a total sum of 10,000 or less. So if you find you're creating a field and you can't drag it into the filter, then use the lookup function just to surround it.